We're gathered here today in the protective shelter of God's love to support one another in our common loss. We're free to share our grief, to face our loss. But more than anything today, we're here to give thanks. We give thanks for having had the opportunity to share in at least a bit of Sam's life, to celebrate his work in the world for the cause of justice, to share the ways that his life will remain alive deep within each of us. May God grant us hope, faith, comfort, and in all things, thankful. Let us now stand and join together in singing "We Shall Overcome." Please the bulletin. The first verse will be a duet, and we can all join on verse 2, and then all making women and men as the instructions. In this kind of heat, you feel more comfortable.
Oh,
and in whose word we hope. We gather in your presence, knowing that life begins, ends, and begins again. Through all the changes in our life and world, you still are God. Remind us yet again today that you are with us, even amidst the startling change that we mark this day. Remind us that death is not the final word. Remind us that your divine mystery rests in all things, and especially in the life of Zan, whom we entrust to your care. O God, help us to commit ourselves and all who are dear to us to your never-failing love. Amen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Unfortunately, Bob couldn't make it. I'm doing his present, so I'm going to be reading I remember beauty, watching the light dancing with the leaves on a summer day, or standing with a shovel in a snow-filled yard while the moon rose above the trees. I remember delight, listening on a summer's evening to frogs in a goldfish pond next door, smelling the flowers of the Japanese cherry tree under a full moon. Yes, this is home to me, and as I stand on the steps outside the house and I look into the darkness sky, I sense you, here with me under these trees.
When journalist Chris Hedges was a teenager, he asked his father, who was a Presbyterian minister, what he said when he visited people who had recently lost a loved one. He was pretty certain his father would have a wise answer. And his father said, mostly, I make the coffee. At the time, Chris disdained the response, but now he honors it. because there is little to do in the face of death but make the coffee, to keep one another company, to tell stories. We don't have words to blunt the pain. But more than anything else, it's our presence. It's our presence together that matters. And so now we have a time of being together and sharing stories and remembrances. And you will see there are a number of people whom Jan has invited, particularly to begin today, beginning with Reverend Finley Schaef, who's pastor of this church for many years. And then later on, a little bit later, we will have an open mic, and all of you are invited to share any remembrance that you would like to. And I'll make that clear in your heart.
Reverend Sam White was a Presbyterian minister and was born on May 14th, 1938 in Mebane, North Carolina, and I understand he was always proud of being a Southerner. He graduated valedictorian and class president from Mebane High School, and he moved on to Davidson College. He received a master's degree from Columbia Theological Seminary, summa cum laude. He was smart. We won't be able to sum up his life in this memorial service because it was so extraordinarily rich and full. We'll be getting some glimpses of his life, but really only God can hold that fullness in God's hand. I would say the key words in his life were caring and community, which some would say are the two most important words in a religious life, caring and community. His first church was in a little town called Enterprise, Alabama. It was a few miles from an Air Force base where helicopter pilots trained to fight in Vietnam. And he got in some trouble there because tension developed over the fact that some of the military families started attending his church, and he couldn't help but express his point of view about the war. So he moved on and later built a co-op in Atlanta to stop racial segregation. Then he became a farmer and worked to build a 1,000-acre land trust in Tennessee and developed a grassroots women's college program. He was married to Jerry, and they had 3 children, Steve, Laura, and Kat. In the late 70s, he joined the National Association of Neighborhoods, and that's when he met Jan Peterson. They were married in 1984 in Virginia. During the 28 years they were together, they worked on the organization Neighborhood Women. and they put together the You Can School. Then he went to Baltimore and ran another community organization for 3 years. Then he returned to the church as a pastor, first in Philadelphia and then in Johnston, Pennsylvania, which was a coal mining and steel mill community. He returned to New York City in 1996. That's when he discovered that he was suffering from Alzheimer's disease, and he went on disability. From then on, he limited his activities to marching against the war, and he's together, hand in hand with Jan, they tried to stop a developer in their neighborhood. In other words, he didn't stop. Wayne wrote a nice little testimony about Sam. I just want to read a piece of it. Her name is Carolyn Stan, which is not here tonight, but they met, she and Zen met when he was in his first church. He was 27 years old, and I was 15, she writes. He was going door to door down K Street in Enterprise, Alabama, introducing himself and inviting folks to his new church. He knocked on our door, and my parents, sensible Methodists, agreed to give this Presbyterian minister a try. We were soon off to Zan's church, which turned out to be a small room in a cinder block building. Perhaps 4 families came to the service, and we sat in folding chairs, staring at the young minister in the front of the room. As I recall, the only thing traditional about the service was that it was being held on a Sunday morning. I sat mesmerized by Zan, analyzing him and the sermon he was delivering. He was smart, he was ebullient, and he was downright different. Maybe he was crazy. And then I started worrying. He was never going to get away with this in Enterprise, Alabama. This kind of exuberance, this kind of unconventional church service with hints of an activist thinking sprinkled through the message. Did he really think he was going to build a church here? Where all Presbyterians this weird, I wondered. I said to my parents as we left church that morning, he's pretty good. We should come back. In a short time, this Presbyterian church outgrew its cinder block stopped and came into full view on top of a green hill surrounded by pine trees on the north side of Enterprise. More and more people and families joined the church. My family was one of them. Eventually, my mother became the secretary of the church. Further on, she says, Zan loved the mountains. And if he could get out of a meeting, he would. And he would take everybody that he could with him on a hike. He could identify every tree, flower, and bird that we might encounter. That's enough right there. He could identify every tree, bird, always teaching was ideas for change. He was a change agent. He was an oracle. So there we have, my friends, an activist for justice who loved nature and singing songs. What she also said about going on the hikes was that he would break out into song and singing songs. What more praise can we offer for one human being? Our beloved Zan White died in Wisconsin on August 9th, 2012, at age 74. He worked tirelessly. May he now rest in peace. He was a true blessing from God. Amen.
Amen.
Now, I'll call on others. Sandy Schilen, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sandy Schilen. And as we all know, we're here today to celebrate the life of Stephen Alexander White III, the sixth, as Zan. Finley stole a lot of my material, but I'm going to persevere. And I'm going to start by letting you know I arrived from Nicaragua this morning at 5 a.m., a place very important in Zan's life. And I bring greetings to Jan from 25 Women from Central. I'm also going to let you know I'm going to cry during my remarks. It's part of what we do in celebrating a life. So we do not weep from grief, but from appreciation. So I'll start by saying Zan has been my friend for 26 years. He's the reason I have Jan as a lifelong friend. He's an important part of why I walk the path I do. 26 years ago, Zan interviewed me for a job. He told Jan to hire me. After many missed appointments and a serious vetting by many women leaders of neighborhood women who are in this room, I became part of the National Congress of Neighborhood Women and of Neighborhood Women of Williamsburg Greenpoint. Zan has joined us in walking a path I do today in a social movement that facilitates grassroots women's leadership and local development in poor, rural, and urban communities. As Finley illustrated, Zan was a social movement activist all his life. But Zan was also a man of privilege who chose to stand with the poor, marginalized and working class. He stood up in his North Carolina hometown of Mebane. He stood up for civil rights and on behalf of workers employed in his family's company. Zan stood up in his Williamsburg neighborhood, and as Finley shared, he stood up in America, not only against the Vietnam War, but also our government's efforts to conquer many oil-rich countries. Zan stood in solidarity with other parts of the world, including Cuba and Nicaragua, and he traveled widely. Zan used his privilege, his money and education, to help others. He started land trusts in the 1980s when they were new ideas for our country. And as Finley shared examples of, Zan listened to deeper sounds, deeper voices, movements of people and nature. He watched birds, trees, rivers, and mountains. He lived and wrote poetry, much of which you will hear today. He converted organized religion into a social justice movement and loved those shunned by or organized to challenge the system. Zan loved Jan deeply. He counted on her to hold 3 memorials for him. We have the privilege to be in the third. Zan listened as a minister, a passerby, as a friend, and as my friend. He had coached and assisted me to buy mountain property and protect my financial position when my marriage imploded. He stood with me when the men closest to me could not. Zan chauffeured an African-American woman leader in our movement and organizer of household workers, uncovering her wildest secrets, and loved her for those idiosyncrasies. Zan lived with and embraced all phases of our movement. He loved Jan deeply. Amidst this, Zan was never easy. Like any good Terraean soul who lived life fully, he was determined, stubborn, and at many times obstinate. Life was never linear to Zan. It didn't follow a projected plan or conform to traditional norms. It did conform to strong humanistic values of social justice. Life opened up to Zan, and he lived it fully, in the moment, almost every moment. In the last stage of his life, living with Alzheimer's for more years than 15, with tremendous dignity and thoughtfulness. After all of this, karma, the Lord, or the oversoul, depending on your belief system, intervened. Knowing that Zan was not going to walk off the planet willingly, easily, or quietly, and who had a character and personality more than comfortable with drama, he left us in a Wisconsin pool. In many ways, it was a miraculous goodbye. There is no question it symbolized the emotional depth of experience and humility with which Zan lived his life. We will remember him for years to come. And I've asked Jane Hart to read a poem by the feminist Cherokee poet Joy Harjo, a poem about and for Zan, but not by him.
Eagle poem. To pray, you open your whole self, to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you, and know there is more, that you can't see, can't hear, can't know except in moments, steadily growing, and in languages that aren't always sound, but other circles of motion. Like eagle that Sunday morning over Salt River, circles in blue sky, in wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all of this, and breathe, knowing that we are truly blessed, because we were born and die soon within a circle of motion, like eagles rounding out the morning in silence. We pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty.
Are there some among us who self-identify as Williamsburg leaders? Is there somebody in particular?
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Rochford. I'm the Executive Director of the St. Nicholas Neighborhood Preservation Corporation, and I'd like to thank Jan for bringing us all together here today. I know it's probably been some trying weeks for you in remembering Zan, but I'm glad that we're here to do it today. our organization, as well as the National Congress of Neighborhood Women, were the founders of a group known as GREC, the Greenpoint Renaissance Enterprise Corporation. There's several all volunteers that are here today that knew Zan. I happen to know him probably the longest amongst our group. Sandy, I can't remember exactly how long it was, but it was probably over 25 years ago. Zan had worked for our organization, and Reverend, I was happy to hear the span of his life and what he had done, because he did that at our organization as well. He was an advocate and an organizer and worked with individuals in fighting for justice, as also fighting for the development of a big piece of property in Williamsburg that has kept us unified over now over a quarter of a century. And I knew him then as a very passionate person, always looking to make the right for people that didn't always have the ability to do that on their own. And he was a great person in working for our organization. I also knew him in a few other capacities when he came back to Williamsburg after many years. I remember him, even to this day, as a person who always had a smile on his face. He was always, it seemed to be always happy. And even when he was passionate and challenging the situation, he always did it with a smile. There was never any rancor, and there was a tremendous determination. I also, I'm glad there's a gentleman that just walked in, and have my most recent memories of Zan. This is Gus, who comes, who's the proprietor of the Garden Grill in Williamsburg, and we have buried a few people in the last few months that have worked at St. Nick's, and many of them, as they got on in years, made a regular stop in their day was to visit the Garden Grill, and Gus and his dad and his mom have been there for many of our neighbors, and I can tell you every day Zan made a stop at the Garden Grill. He had his New York Times under his arm, and he sat there and he studied that paper, and I share that passion myself. And every day he was keeping himself abreast and up to date and intrigued with what was going on around the world as well as within our community. And he was there even in our most recent demonstration for GREC. He stood up with us and was to fight, to upend a corrupt deal to give a private developer land that's publicly owned for development, and to keep that land in the community. He stood with us. He stood with us for over 25 years, and we're so grateful that we have both Zan as well as Jan in our community to help fight these battles, and we are confident someday we all together are going to celebrate a big victory. So I want to thank you all. Thank you, Reverend, for your kind remarks, and Jan, thanks again for bringing us together.
One of the items on Zan's resume is that he worked for St. Nick's Alliance. Well, I didn't include it because I thought I can't include everything, and who goes about St. Nick's Alliance? Anyway, and here he is. St. Nick's Alliance.
That Reverend asked me just to explain a little bit about St. Nick's Alliance. We've been around for, I don't know, Frank, 30 some odd years. It's hard to remember as the years click by, and we came together around a fire, and the pastor were named St. Nick's after the church, St. Nick's Church, and there was a fire, and the neighbors all gathered to help the people, the 18 families who left homeless. And one day, a young organizer named Jan Peterson walked up to the pastor and said, Father, you're going to rebuild on the site of this fire. And I think the pastor looked at her somewhat incredulously and said, I don't know how to build housing or how we would ever do anything like that. And Zan said, that's okay, I'm going to find the people that will help you do it. She went to Pratt and brought people from the Pratt Center and Pratt Institute of Architects and Planners. And that eventually became a development that houses 150 seniors within our neighborhood. And St. Nick's went on organizing and managing affordable property, building affordable property. But we have a passion for organizing and advocacy, and that's the main focus of what we do. We're also active in the area of seniors and as well as youth, and we're a partner organization to neighborhood women in Williamsburg and Greenpoint.
Hello, my name is Marty Tanaki, and I'm a relatively new friend of Zan's. I've known him for only 2 decades. And I have a poem that he wrote for Marie Cirillo, who lives in Tennessee, and she's a kindred spirit. I'm too sure of his, well, she is. And I think I'd like to read this poem to you. Marie, your childhood home was on a quiet street in the city. Bay Ridge, they call this community, where the Hudson River, after its long journey, meets the ocean. Your town has always been a solid place with class, but not opulent wealth. And in the church there, you chose to be a nun, chose a small order working in Appalachia, and there you stayed, knowing the people of the deep hollers and the high ridges, building a home not much different from theirs, serving the friendly, the sullen, the shy, the poor, the violent, the treacherous, the gentle, all of the people. Working slowly, you created new things, new opportunities, new links between people. But most of all, new visions of the possibles, of what women can do, what children can become, of what communities can create, of creating small-scale education and industry, and building new communities from the base to control and heal the land. This was a hard land, a hard one to dream in, these rough, brutalized, stripped, and abandoned hills of Tennessee. Stripping was always the greatest terror, not the stories of bears or the dangers of a rattler on a dark mountain path. It was the invisible man, the one who sent the chainsaw and giant bulldozers and slowly tore down the mountain. That one was the terrible force, the destroyer of the ancient mountain home. And as the bony pile grew, the soul of the people eroded, slowly drained of heritage, of spirit, of love and hope. And many lost all hope, and some became mean. That's the word for it in the hills, mean. Is the callous stripping of the soul, and newness, when fueled by poor liquor, grows violent and vicious like a mad dog destroying whatever its fleas have. And you learned all of this. You took on the pain of these people and offered the only antidote. And I think this is just like Zan's, a quiet spirit, a calm, focused voice, a keen mind, a bright smile, tireless, determined, and focused will, believing there is a force of right in the earth to which all the powers that be must eventually yield, and the people can and will change. Amen.
Some of Zane's caregivers might want to share a word.
Doing a time-honored
Thank you very much, Reverend. And thank you, Reverend, for telling us so much about the life of Zan. I'm one of the unfortunate few here that did not get to know Zan probably as well as many of you did. And it's unfortunate for me that I didn't get to know him better. And it's probably because of the instability of reapportionment in districts. By the way, I'm Assemblyman Joe Lenthal. I used to represent the National Congress of Neighborhood Women until reapportionment took me out of their district. I still don't represent them, but I always have had a closeness and an affinity for the National Congress, and especially for Jan Peterson. And if I had any doubt about how wise a man Jan was, that doubt is shattered now because of his ability to cherry pick Sandy Schilen as an assistant, somebody who works for National Congress of Neighborhood Women. I know Jan for a lot of years, but as I said, we had we hadn't really talked as much as I would have liked, and we hadn't got to know each other as well as I would have liked. But I have to tell you that, and if you'll excuse me, Reverend, but there are ministers who preach the gospel. There are ministers who talk and speechify and have a very good presence in church and know how to tend to their flock and do that every Sunday. Zan was a different kind of preacher as I know him and see him, because he truly saw his mission in life different as to what it meant to do God's work. He thought that his mission was out there toiling in the vineyards and understanding what the people needed every day. Causes like segregation, equal justice, marriage equality, issues that didn't resonate, certainly in the Deep South, and may not even resonate there today. But he chose and had the courage, as a preacher, to stand up for things that were right because they were right, not because they were popular. And he came to Williamsburg and shared that passion with us, to stand up for what was right in the community, to fight against the developer, to fight against a powerful leader that was behind those developers, and do it in a way that was pleasant, yet antagonistic. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that I've lived a long life, and I've known many people. And there are some who make their mark in the world and do it well. There are others who become giants. And we don't know that when we're alive. We don't know that we had a giant walking among us. Now, I know Jan was tall, so he fits the description physically, mentally, and history will show that this man, this gentleman, was a gentle giant. Thank you, Jan, for being among us.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I've been one of Zan's caregivers since last October. I'm probably going to cry as well. So. Our time together was very special to me. We spent a lot of time reminiscing, telling each other stories about our childhoods and our common love of North Carolina. We talked a lot about our families, and he gave me a lot of good advice as well. Being with Zan always helped remind me to appreciate the moment and to notice things like shadows, a flower, the pigeons idling up to a bench, or airplanes flying over the park. And reading Zan's poems made me realize that that was an essential part of who he was and was not just the Alzheimer's, that he had always been that way. We laughed together a lot too. He always enjoyed hearing me tell him the story of my mom, who was a women's liberation activist, and she earned her bra at the Miss America pageant in Atlantic City. And her father saw her, he was a fairly traditional Jewish immigrant. He saw her on the nightly news and he was horrified. So that story always made Zan laugh very hard. And another funny memory I have of Zan is one time we were sitting at the garden grill, and there was a man sitting at the table behind us who was yelling angrily into his phone, and suddenly he screamed, and excuse me if this offends anybody, but he screamed out, Jesus Christ, really angrily. And Zan right away said, well, I guess he's praying. That was one of the funniest things I ever heard. We both just cracked up for a long time. And I got the sense that was classic Zan. I think the core of my friendship with Zan was singing. We sang together a lot. And the first time we sang together was at the Garden Grill. Somehow we started singing Oh Danny Boy together. And at the end of the song, he burst into tears and told me how much that meant to him to sing that song, because his dad used to sing it to him when he was a little kid. And his dad would substitute Zanny for Danny. So from then on, Zan and I sang together constantly. We sang Oh Danny Boy. We alternated it with other hits like Pack Up Your Troubles and Your Old Kit Bag and Smile, Smile, Smile. And also, another favorite was We Ain't Got a Barrel of Money. Maybe we're ragged and funny, but we travel along, singing a song, side by side. And we also sang a lot of selections from South Pacific and Carousel. I don't know anyone else who likes to sing these songs my age, so it was really fun for me to do that with Zan. And we frequently would just walk around the streets singing those songs together. I'm sure it sounded like a pretty funny medley. And I loved singing with Zan. I never got tired of it. And when I heard Zan had died, I was so sad. And I spent a couple of days, I spent a couple of days wondering if he knew that I loved him and that his friendship meant so much to me, and I learned so much from him. And I wish I could see him again so I could tell him that. And then I realized the last line of Oh Danny Boy is Oh Danny Boy, I love you so. And when we sang that last line together, we would often look at each other and smile. So since we sang that song hundreds, if not maybe even thousands of times together, I think I did tell him, and I think he did know. And I will always think of Zan when I sing any of our songs, and I miss him, and I'm so grateful that I got a chance to know him, even though it was only just a few months. And he was one of the most open and bravest people I've ever met.
Sarah, it's nice to meet you. It's Jane. I've heard so much about you. I didn't know Garden Grill had a cabaret license. Stan and I sometimes sang together. I'm Roman Catholic, and for some reason he liked my eagle's wings, so we used to have him down to chew before. When I first met Stan, in October of last year, we would meet for breakfast at the Garden Grill, and our conversation would begin, so what should I do? And I'd tell him some mundane thing about what I'd done over the weekend. But he also asked me, and what do you do for a living? And Zan was not the only person I cared for with Alzheimer's. And so I looked at him and I said, so what do I do for a living? I said, you know, Zan, I help people. I'm a personal assistant. People who need help with little things that aren't going so well. And he'd say, for example, and I would tell, no names were revealed, but I would tell him stories about my other clients and their families. And our relationship became that, a very pastoral one. I came to Zan for counseling. And in the last month, there's lots of questions I would like to ask Zan, and I think about him all the time, because he gave wonderful, wonderful advice. And when Jan called me to tell me that Zan had been in the accident, I was coming back on a bus from the Catskills, and there was a tremendous storm. And the bus driver had just made announcing not to use your cell phones unless it was an emergency. So I was like crunching down and trying to talk to Janet. And when I finished my conversation, I looked out and the storm had stopped. And it was the most beautiful rainbow that went from both sides of the highway. So it looked like it had been done by a child with crayons. You know? It wasn't one of those wimpy happenings. It's the whole thing. And I like to think that was the message from Sam. Thank you.
Hamilton, Andrew Pratt, and I'm glad we're talking about song because Zan was a song, and originally I thought, I don't know if I want to do this song. It's so there's so much repetition, and yet in life there's a lot of repetition, but we forget that sometimes that repetition changes us. And after I started listening to the words, I realized this song is Zan. And so hopefully during the last couple of verses you can sing along with me. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone? Young girls that hit them, everyone. Oh, when will they ever learn? Oh, when will they ever learn? See, I would have liked this because I'm going to do it like a nightclub act. And sometimes that's how it was in his kitchen. Every time we would go for walks, which turned out to be every day because I ended up being his roommate through the gracious love and kindness and giving of his wife, Jan, who I sometimes called Zan, and Zan, who I sometimes called Jan. And Jan never corrected me, but Zan always did. If you knew Zan, that's how it was. In fact, I would always say, you know, that's fuchsia. Look how beautiful that fuchsia flower is. And he'd go, no, that's not. It's pink. And I'd say, it's still beautiful. And he'd say, it's pink. So this is something for those of you who have changed through the years. And when this song was written, I think singing it now has different possibilities. So, where have all the young girls gone? Long time passing. Where have all the young girls gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young girls gone? Gone to husbands, everyone. Oh, when will they ever learn? Oh, when will they ever learn? I think a lot of the young girls have learned that you don't need a husband anymore to be who you are. My sister found that out. She became a colonel in the Marine Corps and followed after my father's footsteps. And, well, we all know what I became, and if you see my mother, you'll understand. But Zan had all these collections of war memorabilia and books, and I didn't even see the extent of it until this week when all the bookcases started to come down. And we talked a lot about it. I talked a lot about my sister, and I talked and agreed with him about how we felt war was something that you discussed. You don't use action towards. I think the war is within. And for me, the way war has transpired, just for me, has become a waste of human lives. And I'm sorry if that sounds a little too harsh, but I worry every day for my sister in Afghanistan, who's about to become a general, by the way. And Zan always had some way to turn it around, to make it positive. Even war had a lesson. So,
where have all the young men gone? Long time passing. Where have all the young men gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young women gone? Gone to the uniforms, everyone. Oh, when will they ever learn? Oh, when will we ever learn?
everybody,
Where have all the men gone? Long time passing. Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the soldiers gone? Gone to graveyards, everyone. Oh, when will they ever learn? Oh, when will they ever learn?
Where have all the graveyards gone?
Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time passing. Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time ago. Where have all the graveyards gone? Gone to flowers, everyone. Oh, when will they ever learn? Oh, when will they ever learn?
Zan said I never should have gone up on that note, but I gotta tell you something really quickly. I didn't know him for that long, but I love the man. You couldn't help but love Zan. So thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Jan. And thank you, Jan. I mean, Zan.
I'm feeling myself that perhaps I'd like to stand and sing for a moment before we have a little bit more time for some brief remembrances. So let us stand and join together in singing This Little Light of Mine.
Why
Jane touched many lives, many people. There are many stories. We're going to take a few minutes now. If some of you have a burning desire to share remembrance, but we do ask that you keep it brief, and if it's something that you need to share with the entire group. Otherwise, I do encourage you to share stories out in the garden for refreshment.
My name is Yeva. I belong to this church for over 25 years and knew Zan from about that long. He changed my life, and it happened that he offered a class in liberation theology here over 20 years ago. And I still remember the first class, about 30 people showed up. They were so eager to be taught about liberation theology, which was quite popular then. And as you know, the version from Latin America had inspired the feminist liberation theology and black theology, and it was in the air. But he did not act like a traditional leader or teacher. Instead, he made us think and initiate our own discussion, and in fact try to use our own leadership capacity. And this was very frustrating. And the next class, only about 10 of us showed up. And even for the next 3 or 4 classes, I found I also was frustrated because I didn't know, what is the structure, what is going on. But by the end of it, I felt I got a very deep understanding of liberation theology, the democracy of it, that every one of us is meant to be a leader in one way or another, and that this is the way to really build community and to make change. And I wrote a little, I'm here at church now, I started a little process where I'm asking people to write their green stories and green dreams about the earth, their experience of it and their dreams for it. And I have a collection in the back. There's this little green box, and you can take some copies. And I wrote a little story in memory of Zan. And I won't read it to you now in order to save time, but I invite you to take a copy when you go back from that little green box. And I would like to commit here and now that in this church we will try to begin forming an earth liberation theology from the grassroots. A lot of theologians are also talking about, how we should treat the earth and take care of it in its dire need. But I think it's really the people that will come up with the real power, because only the people's power has any chance of overcoming the powers of money and greed in the world. So, and also, Zan was full of stories, and he had that lovely Southern style of telling stories in a very easy, charming way. And I think we all need to tell each other our stories, because I think that is the most powerful way to communicate. In fact, in the New York Times Magazine, there was a piece saying that really only emotionally persuasive stories can change anybody's mind. And so let's tell each other our stories and together share them and create a new earth liberation theology. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joyce from Canada, and I'm here to read a poem that Zan wrote about Alzheimer's. And over the past several summers, Zan, Jan, Sandy, and Lisa came to visit Gloria and I on Walker's Island in Ontario. And it was one of our favorite events of the year, and it was a place where Sandy could be safe and happy. So, this is his poem. After speaking on Alzheimer's, the meeting was a success. People around me are saying I did well. I was profound. And so I smile and say thanks, but I really don't know what they mean. Was it that I was clear, or perhaps bluntly honest? Well, it's hard to say that you don't want to play with balloons full of artificial hope, and it's not a secret that this disease is a one-way ticket. Recovering alcoholics are my best allies. They know they are only one drink away from a long slide into darkness. So if I have satisfaction in speaking bluntly and truthfully, and if there is any joy in being honest, it comes later, when I'm with you, and life is quiet and muted, like a fine rain in a summer night.
I think I can stand here and be heard, if that's okay. And I just want to briefly say that I only knew Zan with Jan. And I remember I met Jan before I met Zan. But when I met Jan, I remember that she shared with me that she was the wife of a Presbyterian pastor. And to myself, I said, wow, I bet she's not a typical pastor's wife. Now, and I'm glad that I came back from St. Louis last night so I would not miss this, because now I can really see that Zan was not a typical pastor, not just Presbyterian, but he was not a typical pastor. So my memories of Zan will be Zan with Jan.
Can everybody hear me?
How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
I only knew Zan very briefly in the late 90s for 2 or 3 years. But I have a story that maybe some of you here will remember. It was during the time of huge demonstrations against the war in Iraq. And a group of us from this church had gone to the demonstration. And somehow we lost Zan. And I remember, or maybe people here remember,
Yes.
the Daily News had huge front page story, man punches horse. And there was a photograph of a horse with Zan at the front. He was hitting the horse, and his fist was out to the horse, and there was a policeman with a huge baton trying to hit Zan. But when we caught up with Zan, we heard the true story. The police horse was charging another demonstrator who was on the floor, and he reached for the horse's bridle, pulled the horse's head around, and patted the horse on the nose, because he knows horses. This was his story when we caught him. He knows horses, and he knew that would stop him, which of course it did, which meant that probably the young woman who was on the floor would have been very badly hurt if he hadn't have done that. And I think it's just indicative of his courage, his activism, and his caring for a cause, for the people of Iraq, and for the people in the demonstration who were with him. He was not afraid to stand up to authority and to stand up to this ferocious horse in front of him. Thank you.
I knew Zan when he was here in the 90s and when he came back when he was in the throes of Alzheimer's. And I just wrote a little reflection poem. Zan the Zealot, trumpeting social justice, zany man, risk taker, walking on the edge, zooming ahead, seeing hope and possibility, zapping us with his southern charm, disarming us with wisdom. Zan, zigzagging through life, inviting us all to wake up and smell the coffee and to stop and sniff the wildflowers.
I'm Liesl, one of the longer time friends of Zan and Jan. I mostly keep them different, the names. First, I'd like to share a little recollection from Shirley Evans, who's one of his new caretakers, newer, but she was deathly ill. And so lives in New Jersey, but she came in especially to cook some potato salad before she got ill. And couldn't come today, yesterday and the day before. So that Savannah, Georgia potato salad is from her. And I wanted to say a couple of things about Zan in his Alzheimer time. There was some way in which he was a very seductive fellow because he seemed to engage his caregivers in a romance. Shirley, who's nearly 6 feet herself, met him, I think the day he had recently thrown a shoe at another caregiver. I think his name was Hamilton, when he was being challenged about why he was going out of the front door without any shoes on or something, without finishing getting dressed. And rapidly, she used a kind of, I think, African-American child-rearing techniques, plus kind of romancing him, where she would say, "We're on a date." You know, that would be her attitude. "Where are we going today, Zan?" And he moved from this quite oppositional fellow who often would, challenge anyone who wondered if he would have his keys with him or if he was completely dressed, into someone who was so courtly that he, of course, wouldn't go off and leave her just alone, 6 feet tall, in Williamsburg, but alone on the street or alone on the sidewalk or alone outside of the store that she was attempting to follow him into. So, love from Shirley, a more recent romance. The other thing I wanted to share was, I heard a couple of his sermons. I mistook them when we were looking at memories for poetry, and then I realized he really wrote his sermons out as poems. I'm a ethical culture clergy leader, and we tend to spell God mostly with 2 O's and not 1, but I proudly share the God language in here. He says, "The gospel of love is this: there is a force in the world that is in everything. There is a power in the world that moves, that struggles to change, to create, to bring into being a new way and a new truth which leads to life. The people of God have named this power love. This power is in all the tumult and the struggle and the beauty of creation. But it is found especially in the human consciousness. There it is found in patience and kindness, in the ability to wait, in the ability to understand. It avoids jealousy, bragging, rudeness, selfishness, and resentment. It never takes pleasure in other people's sins, but delights in the truth. It is always ready to forgive, to trust, to hope, and to endure whatever comes. Now, what we know of life and what we know about reality is always partial, never complete. And the way we live our lives is always flawed. Even when we would do the right thing, then we find our anger, our temper, our old patterns are still with us. When we want most to reach out, to be honest, to be open, to find healing, then we find the old ways are still with us. So how can we escape our shadow sides? How can we be freed from the flaws, the anger, the pain, the impatience that so quickly grab us again? Thank God there is a way. It is to love one another. For love comes from God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. How do we learn to love each other? By practicing. By practicing patience with those who irritate us, with those who are stubbornly wrong, with those who want us to go in a way that doesn't lead to healing and life. By practicing kindness with those who are withdrawn, with those who have great needs, with those who have knocked themselves out. with those who are our neighbors, with those who are strangers. By practicing simplicity within ourselves, until we will not let our desire to be praised make us jealous of those who are receiving praise, until we will not let our desire to manage our situation make us indifferent to others' needs. Where can we get this patience, this kindness, this simplicity? By asking God. Ask and you shall receive. Ask and you shall find. Knock and the door will open. God is always ready. So this man was a mystic, it seems to me, and also an activist. And I wanted to close my thoughts today with a little bit of a reflection on some of the ideas that influenced him early, I think following the seminary, but early in his journey as an adult. He came across this ecumenical institute, which was a little-known Methodist liberation theology group that started out of the Christian life community in Texas by two brothers, a brother whose parents were missionaries in India, Joe Matthews. In this book, Bending History, is his speeches. And often when I marry couples, I ask them, of what are you a legacy? Of what tradition of being in the world are you a continuity? And I think it's important to think what inspired Zan. And this group decided that they needed to be the church instead of carry the message of the church. And they went and did village development in 24 time zones, 700 people, families. It was a family order. And they developed study methods, meeting methods, community development, planning methods. And some of us are now sort of rediscovering those. And I wondered, they came from all over the world and studied for a month what they studied in Chicago. And these were the kind of things they would be talking about. Talked about this ethic of this time in history. A third way of describing this ethic, one of the speeches, is to call it the morality of creativity, a decisional ethic, an ethic of freedom. I create my own morality in every given situation. I decide the goal. I decide the right. Significance has to be created and injected into any given relationship. That's what I mean by decision or freedom. Another way of talking about this ethic is that it is a morality of authenticity. Authenticity has to do with assuming final responsibility for your own concrete, created, moral deed. I like to use the ancient poetry, saying to myself, when I get to heaven, ancient poetry, this is actually a Jewish story, but when I get to heaven, they are not going to ask me what my wife or husband thought of me. They are not going to ask me what my colleagues thought of me or what youths thought of me. They are not even going to ask me what history thought of me. They are going to ask me what I think of myself. That is authenticity. It is like teetering on the edge of your own grave. At that moment, your life turns from many, many happenings and many, many deeds into one great happening and one great big deed. To be a moral person is to take it all into your being, and then you fall into that hole. That is authenticity. And I think authenticity is one deep part of both Zan and Jan. And I think, and I go on, but we have no time, engagement in history, in the opening that is history at this time, was the other part. And I ask us to also thank all the people who took that, their own authenticity, engaged with Zan in this last very painful 16 years of his life, and accompanied him with great dignity.
Let us pray. O Holy One, you made each of us in your image to reflect your truth and light. Each of us is a unique and vital piece of your creation. No one else has our genes, our life experience. No one is us. We are unique. And so, God, we give thanks for the uniqueness of Zen, for all the gifts and graces that you bestowed upon him and that were shared with us. We thank you for the time shared with him, the group seen him, the love expressed through him. We're thankful that for Zan, suffering and even death itself has passed. We're thankful that Zan was convinced that the world and all people were made to be free. We lift up to you now all those things for which we're thankful, the lessons we've learned, the memories we share, which we now briefly speak out loud.
I am grateful for the gentleness expressed in Dan's eyes. And he taught me that to be a true leader, you also needed to be a good follower.
Thankful for his laughter.
For a sense of humor.
For sociability that drew stories out of others.
Thankful that even though he got arrested at a demonstration, recent demonstration, he still came to church as soon as he got out of jail to share his story with us. and that in that moment, I realized who he was as a person, and thanked God that he didn't get as beat up as he did, even though he did get beat up, and he was able to share that with us.
Thank you for introducing us Northerners to a true Southern gentleman.
Thanks to the people of Williamsburg who gave him a safe and dignified place and neighborhood to be himself.
For every time he got lost, he got found. The police and the firemen that all helped.
Oh God, we move through our memories and stumble over our words to make them prayers. But above all else, we offer thanks. We are truly blessed for having known Zane, and we now commend him back into your forgiveness and love. Receive him into the arms of your mercy, into your home, where all your children dwell in peace. As you have given Zan new life, raise us into new life as well. New lives free of fear and hostility, fatigue and complacency. Help us with renewed integrity to love and serve you in this world, so that all people may come to know your joy. Amen.
Hi, my name is Alia Goldenberg, and I knew Zan for about 12 years, and I worked with Jan for most of that time, doing international work and local organizing in Williamsburg. And I'm going to sing "We Shall Not Be Moved" because of the Civil Rights Movement song, and because I think that whatever hardships come about, this is a reminder of what we will all continue to do and make our commitment to continue the struggle and so many struggles that we still have. On the road to freedom, we shall not be moved. On the road to freedom, we shall not be moved, just like a tree standing by the water. We shall not be
want to die thoughtfully at some chosen place. I want to break the grasp of my pain, take a great breath until it fills every crevice of my body, and then gently let go. As I watch the city from the roof, I remember what you shared with me. When you reach the high meadows, first find the berries and fill your pockets with wild fruit. Then go to the edge of the meadow, scan the horizon, focusing your eyes on the high mountains. Linger there until the sun is gone. When it's twilight, go toward the hemlock trees. On the edge of the forest, you'll find a path. Follow it deep into the dark woods until you reach the stillness. There in the sanctuary of the great trees, lay down and rest till daylight comes searching for you.
Thank you all for all of your shared remembrances and your presence here. A truly blessed time together. Let us now stand and join together in singing our final hymn. We're going to sit at the welcome table, look forward to that day when we do learn, and our life together will be what is best described as a great banquet. We're all welcomed now. Let us stand and sing together. It's in the song book on the blue pages. Go now in peace. May God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God's Spirit be upon you and give you peace this day and forevermore. Amen. Amen. And we invite you all to join at the welcome table out in the garden. Go in peace.